So today we're talking about Beyond the Logo is our title, sort of the brand beyond the logo. Our starting point should be, because it's something that and it's really nice as someone and for yourself, who's been in the industry for so long, just to remind ourselves, what is a brand? What is a brand about? So here you go, Liz, you kick off.
I feel like we might have taken Matt Davies' podcast tagline there, because I feel like they might have a bit of a niche in this one. But we'll run with it. So I think we've said this before. There used to be a lot of strategy by Martin Neumeyer. And I know we've done a brand is not a logo, it's not a name or a product, but I've actually reframed it and said actually a brand is the reputation, the story, the promise. This isn't new news to most of our listeners if they've talked to us or heard about us before. But one thing I think is interesting right now is there are so many channels and platforms that brand needs to live in, because the digital presence, we're all living online, that I actually think to keep a brand consistent and play up to all of those reputations and stories, I think the future of brand is a little bit more fragmented than just going, oh, it's a gut reaction, it's a feeling. It is, but it also needs to live in all of these different worlds and universes in which we interact with it. Do you have a better definition?
No, it's true. Absolutely right. And it's being as flexible as possible. And the landscape is shifting all the time in terms of how a brand communicates. But what I think would be quite interesting is looking into the word brand. So where does the word brand come from? You never even thought about this. And so the word brand comes from, apparently it's an old Norse Viking word from brander with the R at the end. And essentially it was where we branded our livestock to define whose stock belonged to who. And as the world developed and as sort of the idea of the business context came into fruition, we started using the word brand to associate with a name or a logo with a brand or service. So as time's gone on, so in the modern day, we encompass what I've written down here is there's a broader range of elements. So it's not just the stamp or the logo, that's the name, logo, the reputation, but as you said, the overall perception of the company or product. It is literally a brand been burnt into but again, that's all changing. This shifting landscape we're talking about, where there's so many applications for how your brand is applied and how we talk, how we communicate. Hence me trying to stamp my brand everywhere. You'll start to see it all over the place, but that's how we try and do it. Again, just not just physical formats.
Yeah. I lost you sound-wise for a minute, but you're back now.
With all this in mind, Liz, how is the landscape changing for brands? We know we've just spoken about sort of the digital aspect is changing, because over the last 50 years, think how much a brand, where it has to apply its efforts.
So I don't honestly think that what a brand is has changed, but I think the places it shows up have absolutely changed. We're a brand, like I think we underestimate even us as a personal brand. Everyone has a way that they appear in the world, which is the same for any brand, whether you're Nike or whatever. It's how you show up, and there are different ways that you show up. But I think to me, it's more about why does it even matter? Maybe we should talk a little bit to like, why do we need to care about why we show up consistently in a certain way? And I kind of made some notes to help us stand out. Like there's so many brands out there now, and it's easy for us to talk about the ones there are obvious ones that have done it well. We always talk about Apple as the example, consistent, what they stand for. I have a friend who the other day explained how he'd bought an Apple Mac but installed a Windows operating system on it, which blew my mind. I'm like, what? Why would you buy a Mac and then put Windows on it as an Apple person? And it was about the battery life and everything. But, Apple operating system sits with Apple, the brand, because they simplify the whole experience for people who don't want all of the fluff on their computers. But they've been consistent in everything they stand for. And I think, look, a brand needs to stand out. There's a lot that are saying, what's your defining point? And I've even been on calls today where we've actually gone, working with a pet food client at the moment. They have lots of different pet brands. And what they're asking us to do is do a digital toolkit or an adaptive world from the brand. Yeah. So I said, okay, that's cool. But if you've got 5 pet food brands, what I really need to know is what makes each of these different. So that if you're just going to copy what everyone else has done, and we're seeing it a lot now with AI, right? The rise of AI means that you can go, create me a content piece that's consistent for this brand, but actually is it different? Because there's a lot of same. So whilst AI is amazing, you're going to put the right stuff in it, it's just going to look like everyone else's. So I think to stand out in this sea of sameness and also build the trust within the audiences. Like we trust Apple. They've been consistent in our lives for a long period of time.
Apple to me is an interesting one, because that is, just to sum it up, I was trying to sum up a couple of these key big brands, and when you associate one key word with that brand, Apple is quality. And this is why you pay more for the brands like Apple. And that's what they've I guess, they're the one word they're associated with. And there are lots of other examples, I think, that sort of brands that stamp quality. Nike is another one, I guess, to quality, but that's also what's there. Just Do It, obviously. With all these brand straplines that we could think about, we know their association. But my thinking behind branding is that we were just talking before about the flexibility and having to adapt. But I had a point here about the adaptation is being driven by technology and the evolving consumer expectations about what do we want from these brands that we associate ourselves with. And a lot of them are chasing this sort of personalization, trust, authenticity, all the keywords we've sort of used before when we talk about brands. But I think now at the moment, the way brands are having to evolve is they need to make sure everything, the way in which they talk to their consumers, has to be almost to a certain extent personalized. So they feel that the brand is talking to them and them alone. Easier now with AI and bots and everything else, you can make sure that everything's just sort of seem like they're being targeted specific to you. Do you think that's the way things are going? Brands are having to think beyond.
Well, I think the difference is, so we make brands help us feel something, we make an emotional connection. Notoriously, we've gone to where the brand is, but actually now the brand needs to come into our world. How does it show up in our world? So because of the digital accessibility, it's how do brands get into your algorithm? How do you not feel sold to? Because we don't want to be sold to, but they've got to show up authentically in our space because we're not going to go to them anymore. And someone was talking the other day about, years ago, you'd want something for your bike attachment or something. You go to the bike shop, you'd find your solution. Whereas actually now no one cares enough because we talk about brand experience being in stores and it's still valid. There's a lot of brand experience, pop-up stores. The people do still want, there's kind of a backlash, I think. So I think there's a movement of people like, I can't be asked to go into town to go to whatever shop to get what I want, but I still want the experience of that brand. And then there's these people that are going, I'm not going to do this online thing. I want the whole real, authentic brand experience. I want to go into the shop. So I think whilst during COVID, we saw a decline in actual stores, we got used to shopping online, direct to consumer. I think there's a movement now that's going the other way. We want this big, bold, but we want it to be more immersive and more experiential than we did before. And how brands do that. You see them shop. Even if you just take the example of an airport and you walk through the airport, how many brands now are using that for their brand experience? Because they know people will go there more than they'll go into town to go to the shop. So what a great opportunity for brands to live in that world. And if it's in, not all brands will be in an airport, but I do think it's a good opportunity to go, people still have to travel to airports. They can't escape it.
Well, that's a difficult one because you're being sheep herded through sort of fence posts of where you need to be going. So you're having this brand slammed in front of you. You can't delete, you can't close that pop-up window. It is straight in your face, like going to a shopping mall or whatever it might be. Lisa, I think one of the other interesting points about this is with the aspect of AI, consumers now still want their brand to be humanized. I know we've touched on this before, I think, in a previous podcast, is you don't want to know that your brand uses AI and it's been perhaps the brand leaders have been typing into ChatGPT, how do we talk to this consumer? They want to be spoken to in a personal way, but also understand there's a human at the end of this. It's not a robot sort of telling me what I want to be sold.
And it's an interesting one, right? Because we all, when it first happened, and I think to the Coca-Cola campaign that was done purely in AI, we're like, yeah. Coca-Cola is doing this. And actually our industry is actually I don't want to say it's in crisis because it's just in a massive period of change. And I'm using them. We're using AI tools to get us there quicker or to think about it. But the novelty factor is still there at the moment. It's like, Coke did their first campaign in AI. Look how good it was. But then at what point do people turn around and go, I don't want the same generated stuff. What's authentic and what's real? To your point of, do they want a human? What level do they want a human? Do they want to know a human wrote the advertising campaign? Do they care enough? Because I've got people who are happily to talk to ChatGPT instead of friends.
Yeah.
So
I think the key aspect is we are now starting to see that it's becoming, I don't know if you're starting to feel the same thing, but if you're using ChatGPT or an equivalent on a regular basis, the output it's giving you and providing you with is starting to become quite samey. And you're kind of thinking, and we're starting to see this now in advertising where some of these brands are talking to us in a way it's just a bit samey. They're not actually, no one's standing out now to a certain extent, or very few are, should we say. There's a lot of these brand communication elements which are starting to, they don't shout, I'm new, I'm telling you something which you haven't heard before. And so I'm finding that certainly my own personal experience of using AI for some of my work is it's not giving me anything that I sort of hadn't seen yesterday type thing. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
unless you've got a really specific need. Again, everyone just needs to learn to be AI prompt ninjas is how we'll
Yeah,
get the
yes,
best.
that's
But
true.
also, how much value is there? And we always talk about this. We should do another podcast on this because I think the last one we did was like 2016 on the mindfulness part, because the best ideas come when you all step away. It's still relevant now to go, we had the shower moment, that was it. Like, it still happens when you're not sat at your computer. And I will say, in the last 3 days, I've not been allowed to take or access my computer. The course that I did was no computers. You can have a notebook,
Yeah.
you can have your phone with you if you want to record stuff. But actually, it really pushed people to come up with better solutions. And I think we really undervalue the need in our lives, not just for good ideas, is that sometimes they come from nothing. And if you've always got something, you go, hey, give me an idea for this. Is it
Mm.
really pushing the level of creative? It's great for thought starters. It's great to create something that you go, it's going to take me 20 hours in Photoshop. If a thing can do that for you, that's cool. Like, no one wants to be doing that.
We'll just pick up on a conversation we're having just before we press record, and I think it's quite a poignant time to do it. Is talking about the use of AI and the heavy use of AI within brand development. When we start talking about brand reputation and the idea of keeping it simple, I'm thinking about there are brands out there who are at the moment probably getting it wrong. And again, this is probably quite a subjective thing, because some might argue, certainly in our industry, this particular example I'm going to talk about got it right because it got people talking. I'll cut to the chase. In their recent campaign, which some would term as killing the leaping cat or killing the cat. So they developed this campaign, which is an attempt to solve a problem that didn't exist. I've written down here is that it was a hollow attempt to suggest that the brand was associated with an iconic British racing heritage, but then flipped it on its head to say it was attempting to emulate the edginess and a minimalist marketing world of luxury brands. But it failed dismally, some would say. Certainly the classic customer to that brand hated this new approach, and they thought they'd been completely forgotten about. You've got rid of all the aspects of this brand which we loved. You're ignoring our brand DNA right now. And I think that's where it becomes damaging. And I don't think we can tell just yet, because they haven't launched a new product, in its true entity just yet. They've given us some taste of what the product might look like. But people are getting it wrong, I think. And I think that's one example. There are others, specifically that one, certainly with the use of new technologies.
Yeah. And I remember at the start of this call, I was saying to you, like, I was ready to fight with you on this until a few weeks ago, because I was like, look, at least they're doing something brave and different.
Yeah.
And then obviously, it has been a fail. They are looking for a new agency. And then I kind of unpacked and I thought to myself, actually, because they've changed their identity at the same time as they've launched this whole new positioning, and almost those two together, often you'd have a brand identity, you'd have almost assets that are owned by that brand, of which Jaguar was the leaping horse. There were all of these things that made Jaguar aesthetically, cats, aesthetically, but actually no one really unpacked that to understand what they meant. They kind of just went, this is crafted and it's different. We assume they almost used a communications agency, and this is sometimes where I used to really stand up and go, design agencies can do advertising, but I'm not sure it can work the other way around. So I'm not sure if someone who knows how to launch an advertising campaign can go back into the craft of a brand. I'm sure they can. I'm sure there are people who do it really well, but there's a reason agencies that we talk about, like JKR, focus on brand, and then they work with communications agencies to shout about that brand. And so I think maybe there was a disconnect in the agency that Jaguar used that went, yes, we're going to change the logo. Yes, we're going to change the identity and the positioning and all of these brand pillars. And then we're also going to launch it in this whole, we're going to borrow from fashion. I can kind of see what they were trying to do, but I'm just not sure if they went too big and too brave and too bold, something that we go on. But I respect the fact that they said, we're going to run with this. And maybe they just didn't run with it long enough. Because I think it was only in January, now it's May, and they're like, we're looking for a new agency. And it gets them in the news, right? It also gets you in the news, and apparently no media is bad media. But I also think you have to give things time to, if you truly believed that was the right positioning, they should have kept going with it.
Well, I think that, going back to my point, the product hasn't been launched yet. It's literally the early days of this campaign. But to your point, it is about getting the words out there about this brand. No one was talking about Jaguar 6 months ago. Or maybe if they were talking about failing numbers. They were talking the fact that sort of Range Rovers are failing and keep breaking down and what have you. And it's the JLR, whatever it's called, they were struggling for numbers. So I think for me, summarizing that particular brand change is We don't know yet. It's too early to tell. We will be able to tell. Well, certainly basically they said we're going to remove the combustion engine out of all of our vehicles and we're just going to go entirely electric. And then governments all around the world are saying, well, I don't think that's going to happen. So Jaguar could have shot themselves as well. But they said we are still going to produce the combustion engine cars. Don't worry.
Look, we're still putting polystyrene in microwave boxes here, so we're not quite that far advanced yet. Not even on top of sustainability. But I think I always think about the brands that get it right as well and why they get it right. And I think it's easy. Again, the tagline, I put Cadbury down. Like, I know it's an old brand, we've known it, and everyone goes, yeah, it's always purple. But it's also made its thinking and its mindset around made for sharing. Even if it did something different, even if it went, we've got rid of the purple, if there was a reason that talked to, we're about sharing a moment, you'd still believe it. And so I think always go back to what do people think of the brand? And one of the things I put to my pet food clients today is, why would, like, these brands they look the same, they're both recommended by pets, why would I buy that one over that one? And it's interesting talking to even why someone, or the brand positioning for a Mars bar and a Snickers bar are totally different. The target audience, the need states of that target audience are totally different. So if you're a brand, and interestingly, as part of the course I've just done, they said in your big bold vision, you need to really define your first archetype. And it can go beyond that. We've had it with clients. They go, we want to appeal to everyone. Cool. You're just going to get generic content that everyone does.
Yeah, very true.
You need to define exactly who you're talking to. And say for a Snickers, it's actually to fill you up. It's not just an indulgent thing. So having that need state and that this is the one person that I need to appeal to, and then other people will latch onto it. So if you're a new brand, it's easy for us to talk about Cadbury's or Nike, and you go, well, Nike's just do it. I always think about Nike, and I wear Nike runners, but I think Adidas, depending on where you're listening to this, is the braver brand. I think their impossible is nothing, even though we go like, wow, like Nike's the hero, it's better. I actually think Adidas has bolder, different consistency in terms of the artists they bring in to work on their clothes. The types of clothes and the people that they appeal to and the collaborations that they do, they're just braver. Their stuff's not better, they're just braver as a brand.
And that can be made easier sometimes because, as in the degree of braveness, if that's a word or a statement, is if you're a smaller brand, in terms of numbers, I'm assuming Adidas is smaller than Nike. My perception of those brands are, but the smaller you are, the more you can take a risk. I think it makes sense to a certain extent, although that probably goes both ways.
I think if you position yourself well, I think you can take a risk once you set the scene, as long as it's like the KFC thing going like, yeah, we messed up. Because I think there's something quite nice about a brand being, that adds to your authenticity.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's probably what will happen with Jaguar.
Yeah.
They'll get so years down the line going, you're right, not we messed up, but we realize we've listened to you. And how often do we love it when a brand listens to us? So if you are a brand, like, and you try something different and then your feedback is like, no, to come out and go, actually, we listen to the people and it's not what you want.
And you could argue it was an intentional thing. They just wanted to spark up a bit of news headlines.
Yeah, we've all had those conversations to go, was it a fake launch by Jaguar? Like, was this all like fake news? Is this like War of the Worlds years ago and none of this is real? Are we in the Blair Witch Project all over again? So people are less shockable and people are a bit more cynical now.
Yeah, well, absolutely they are. But I think ultimately it's about the brand understanding their own brand DNA. And if you get it right from the start and you understand who that is, every time and every bit of communication you put out there on whatever platform it is, make sure you know what you're saying, who you're saying it to. For example, that Jaguar thing, I know they got it wrong. Maybe it was intentional, but they were talking to the completely different consumer to who their current customer base is. I don't know. Maybe, as I said, I was saying in our upfront conversation, the sales of classic Jaguars, or at least the numbers of the sales prices of these classic cars has gone up. And the fact that they know now this is a rare thing. If you've got an old Jaguar Sovereign or whatever Jag it is, you've got XJS, a nice little classic.
And look, in terms of the future of audiences, like, they're going to change. Like, it's hard to work out, what your Gen Alphas and everything are going to appeal to them. You've kind of got to, because there's a lot more diversity and different channels that they'll be on. So, even down to like, okay, you can't design for everyone. You can't brand for everyone. Yeah. You have to have, this is my guy, or this is my person that I'm doing it for. and then everything else will flex from there. You kind of need like a singular goal. And we know, because we've all got the clients that go, we wanted to appeal to everyone. You can do that, but first let's appeal to this person and let's focus on these channels. At the moment, we're doing a lot of digital work where we'll have those conversations where they go, actually, these are the things we know to go to market. They might be how we show up on Amazon as a marketplace. We need digital profile pages of the information that people can scroll down because we know people are using mobile. But that every single brand now has to consider all of those touch points, and they all need to be tailored. When we first used to be able to shop online, and you load up Waitrose or wherever it was, and you just get a little picture of the packet. It's an interesting world right now. You get a picture of the packet and go, "Yep, that's my packet." Now people want a whole lifestyle shot. They don't just want a picture of dog food. They want a dog running through a field because it taps into their mindset, their lifestyle. Is it a dog that you go, that's like my dog. You know, and so the digital world is shifting really quickly. And if you're a brand, you need to tap into that and innovate within that space, because that's what's going to make people be brand loyal. Like, we don't want to look at Waitrose and just tick the boxes anymore. We got used to it in COVID, and we want to be able to see the information that we need. It's how, as a brand, you have your hierarchies. What's the one thing that your one message you want to put out there, and everything else is second, because you can't say everything. So I think that's what I still think the world of branding is so strong in defining that. What do we stand for? But your hierarchy priorities might change because of the worlds that you're designing or branding into.
And the other thing, and we touched on this in our last podcast, is the method of communication and how the layers in which it has to talk to. We were talking before about, you've got all these different social platforms, for example. The language you use for, let's say, for example, LinkedIn might be very different to TikTok, and even the visual you're using. If you're using a still to a 10-second clip to a 20-second clip, all these assets have to be built together. So whatever campaign you're developing, you know that, number one, you're talking to different platforms, and also within those platforms you're talking to different consumers as well. So you have to have this ability to talk on so many different levels, so it becomes quite complex. So when you do have a customer that comes to you and says, I want to appeal to everyone, well, we can give it a go, but as you said before,
but it's also exciting as a brand. If you've got a good stable platform, even us as Shelf Impactors, we want a new season. We want the content to be relevant. We know it wants to be shorter because people have less time. So we've kind of been, if you just consider it and go, actually think about the audience as much as we think about us, because we're not trying to make money from podcasts. We're going, actually, I like these conversations. People seem to like these conversations. Also, let's do video. So I think meet people where they are. Go to where your audience is. So if you define your audience first, who are we even doing this for other than ourselves? How do we show up? And I would definitely, not to summarize too quickly without us getting to the end, but I think that's what I would say for anyone who's building a brand, who works with a brand. Go, how are we showing up now into other people's world? Because it's not about they come to us, they don't. How can you go to them? But I have a real specific person in mind. It really helps.
Yeah, absolutely. We used to love those as creatives, as designers in studios, when the strategists would come to us with this is our target customer. Pinpointing, giving them the name and age.
I know, it's Aunt Mavis in Chicago, Illinois, and she buys Fruit Loops every Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. But it's great because then you know what you're targeting and who you're talking to, the language you're using, the level in which you're going to be talking, and the amount of information they can take on board. So those sorts of things are really important anyway. But no, I agree, Liz. For me, in summary, I think when we're talking about the brand is beyond the logo, it's now more than ever. It means there's no longer stamping your back of your cow and saying, right, that's my cow. That's where it's coming. That's where, you know where it's come from. Blue Nectar cows. I'm not saying I'm going to cows.
I want that one in the next episode. I just want a cow in the background there.
Yeah. Well, there's enough logos being stamped around here. It might happen. I'll brand the dog maybe. But it's also, I think, whilst we're sort of talking about beyond the logo, it's making sure your brand is flexible as well. So these keywords, they keep coming back. Authenticity, making sure you're talking from a human to a human, and be authentic.
And work with people who love brands.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, Lisa, I think we've covered pretty much everything on that one. I
enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too.
We can get the listeners to put, when we post this, in our comments some of the brands that they love and why, because I actually love to hear why people buy the brands they do.
Successes and failures is a good one as well. Other brands they think have been successful and some which have really failed. I mean, it is actually very quickly. I did think there were a couple more. There was Gap. Remember that awful logo they came up with, and that was just about the logo being appalling.
The Google one and the Google one as well at the moment is causing there's been a lot
Yes.
of memes that I've been following of, because so we say about Jaguar and they're a topic of our conversation, but then there's the opposite of that. I saw a lovely meme the other day of the brand of bar, like a protein bar, and literally it was all they've done is their logo used to just go outside of the edges of a box and they've moved it inside the box.
Yeah.
And the memes are of the marketing team going, "Well done, guys. Well done."
Yeah.
You decided
I
just
know.
put it in the
Again,
box. Just blur
it's
the
not
colors
just the
on the
logo.
logo.
It's gone beyond the logo. We are judging it just in the fact they've just changed the logo. I'm sure
What it
behind that,
what
so
it
much
goes
has
is
changed.
there's a reason they've done that, and it's to
Yeah.
make it more friendly for an online world. That's exactly why they've done it. It's the same with Google. They've smudged the lines of the rainbow of the Google logo. Well, there'll be a reason behind it. It's not just like someone going like, "We need to change logo." Can you just smudge
Yeah.
lines? There'll be a
Yeah.
lot of deep thinking behind it. So I think always try
Absolutely.
and go, all right, there's a reason behind this, and then see how it shows up, because it might start integrating into your world differently, and then it all makes sense.
Yeah. Very true. Lise,
Good
brilliant.
stuff.
Love it. Well, listen, until next time, we'll chat soon.
Chat so much.
All right. Cheers, Lise.